They say that those who do not remember history are doomed to repeat it. So, quick, for those of you who have not been following me on Facebook, what happened on March 28, 1979? Headline story. The nuclear reactor at 3 Mile Island malfunctioned. I can never forget this because I was there. I was in Los Angeles and needed to get out of town for some crisis or another, and called a girlfriend of mine from Boston who had just moved down to a small town outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, with her husband, who'd gotten a job as a mechanic at the Harrisburg airport. And when she greeted me at the airport, she had a big smile on her face, and she said, "Ah, you came to the right place to cool down." Middletown, which was the name of the town, Middletown is really Middletown. Nothing important ever happens here. 5 days later, 1 mile from their home, the nuclear reactor malfunctioned. Now, this was a household that did not have a television set, was not into media. So my friends were at work, I was there working on a writing project, and didn't know anything about it until about 5 o'clock when I went across the street to a 7-Eleven-ish type store, and I overheard a conversation. The woman was saying, well, they say that the radiation is no harder than what you would get in an X-ray. My ears perked up, and I said, "Excuse me, is there a problem?" And she said, "Oh yeah, there was an accident at the end plant, the 3 Mile Island." And I went, "End plant, 3 Mile Island?" And she looked at me and she said, "You're not from around here, are you?" I said, "No." And she said, "Yeah, it's the nuclear plant at 3 Mile Island." And I said, "Well, where's that?" And she said, "About a mile that way. You can see the cooling towers from the playground." Went back, my friends came home, and we talked about it, and we basically agreed, because we were not involved in the media, that it was a big media hype, that they were blowing it up out of proportion. So the next day, I had already made contact with a brand new publication called LA Weekly, and I thought I could write a story for them because here I am in the middle of this faux story. So I walked into Middletown, talked with people, did some interviews. They were all excited about the media being there. And then I went into Harrisburg to see my friend, where we sat down and we tried to figure out, was this media hype or the government lying? And we didn't know, but we just didn't know what we were supposed to do, so we went back to 3 Mile Island. Third day. My friends are at work. I'm sitting at the computer, at the typewriter, working on something, when I hear something going down the street. And I run downstairs, open the door, and I hear this loudspeaker say, "Keep your doors and windows closed and do not go outside unless you have to." Slammed the door shut, went running for the phone, picked it up. There was no dial tone. The phones were so overloaded that there was no way to call out. So here I was, alone in a house, no transportation, certainly no public transportation going by, didn't know the neighbors, there was no basement to hide in, and everything that my government had made me afraid of when I was a child that was going to come from the Russians was sitting 1 mile away from me, and we didn't know if this thing was going to blow. So I'm there stuck, wandering around the house from room to room, totally overwhelmed, when I found myself in front of the bathroom mirror. Now, there was a game that my family used to play when we were kids and we were in the car and we would be stuck at a red light. We'd try and guess when the red light would turn green. So we would count to ourselves, 3, 2, 1, and try and point at the exact moment that the light would change. So there I was in front of the mirror with this nuclear nightmare down the block, and I looked at myself in the eye and I tried to figure out if I would know a split second before that thing exploded that I was about to turn into atomized dust. And so looking at myself in the eye, I counted out loud, 3, 2, 1. Oh, not this time, maybe next. 3, 2. The phone rang. My friends got through. They were going to pick me up in about an hour, and we were going to leave town. So we packed myself, my 2 friends, and their cat and a typewriter into a VW bus and went 150 miles away where we were not announced, but the friends of theirs were not unexpected that we were going to be showing up there. That was the first time we saw television where we watched Walter Cronkite getting mad on our behalf. We watched The Government Lies. We watched a man who was speaking for the Nuclear Regulatory Committee. Pasty face, sweat coming down his face like this, his hand shaking like this, saying there was nothing to be afraid of. Now, at this place, I couldn't leave because the airport was closed. So we were stuck in the evacuation place for the next week, during which time I worked on a musical that the idea had just come to me, and I was obsessive about it because I had to think about something. And at the same time, ate enough to gain 5 pounds in 7 days. Then, when the airport reopened, we went back to town, and I stayed there just long enough to go to a press conference where I snagged a photographer to take some pictures with the local, establishment, the local site. I also bought a T-shirt So I passed this around. This is one of the photos that got taken. And from there I went back to Los Angeles, where I proceeded to suffer from post-traumatic stress before we knew the term. I drank to excess for the first time in my life. I did stupid things while driving a car. I debated driving my car off the edge of either Mulholland or Las Virgenes. And I, on a daily basis, debated whether or not I was going to get myself sterilized, because there was no way to find out what the chromosomal damage had been. In part because we never knew how much radiation leaked, because the equipment that was supposed to measure that was supplied by the lowest possible bidder, so of course it didn't work when it was necessary for it to work. Either that or the government was lying. We never figured out which. Anyway, this only started to break for me when 6 months later I went to Israel on a trip. My mother finally got me over there because I figured, what the hell? And I met people who had suffered a lot worse than a leaking nuclear reactor a mile down the street. So, why am I bringing this up now? Because this Sunday, March 28, 2010, is the 31st anniversary of 3 Mile Island. And last month, Barack Obama vowed to give $8 billion for development of new nuclear reactors, 100 nuclear reactors as part of the clean, green energy program in the United States. Now let me tell you, nuclear energy is not clean, green, or safe. It creates radiation, and the rods that are created there that have radiation have a half-life. They're plutonium. They have a half-life of 24,000 years. That means it will take 24,000 years for them to be half as dangerous as they are right now. The Iroquois nation said that, which is the basis for the government in the United States, it was the model for it, says that you should consider every decision as its impact for 7 generations. Right now that would be 150 years. 24,000. Do they think that they can store this stuff in a way that's going to be safe? They want to sink it in the ground because there are no plans for permanently getting rid of this stuff. There's no way to get rid of it. So they want to sink it in the ground and cover it up. Do you think that there are no such things as earthquakes in 24,000 years? That the material that is holding it is not going to decay? That there's not going to be a problem with it? So the reason that I'm saying this now is because it's not yet happened. There is still time for us to turn this around. And the reason that I want this to happen is because I don't want you or your children or their great-grandchildren to one day be staring at themselves in a mirror with some nuclear nightmare just down the road, looking themselves in the eye and counting to themselves, 3, 2, 1.